Hello YouTube, hello people, and so welcome to another episode of How to Follow Jesus Christ, episode 12, and today's study, or episode, is on God's special plan. So let's start. About 1900 BC, God chose a man named Abram, or later renamed Abraham, to become the father of a nation whom he promised a special destiny. God made a covenant with Abraham in which he promised that through his descendants all nations would be blessed. God confirmed this to Abraham's son Isaac and to his grandson Jacob, whom he changed to Israel. 430 years later, through Moses, God made a further covenant with Jacob's descendants, the nation of Israel, in which he gave a complete set of laws and a full picture of their destiny. Later, God sent prophets to Israel to predict their destiny, how it would be worked out. Okay, so let's begin. So section 8, God's purpose revealed to Abraham. Question 1. How many people did God promise Abraham would be blessed through him? Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 says, all the families of the earth. Question 2. On what basis did God accept Abraham as righteousness? Genesis chapter 15 verse 6. Abraham believed in the Lord, so he believed everything God had told him and he put his faith in him. Even though he hadn't seen the evidence of it happening, he knew it would happen, and that was accounted to him, or equivalent to, as righteousness in God's eyes. Question 3. To how many people did God promise to make Abraham a father? Genesis chapter 17 verse 4 and 5, it says, a multitude. Question 4. With whom did God make an everlasting covenant? Genesis chapter 17 verse 7 says, me and you and your offspring, and through their generations. Question 5. What promise did God give to Abraham in this covenant? Genesis chapter 17 verse 7 is, to be God to him and his descendants. So God would be Abraham's God, and he would be their God, and he'd be Abraham's descendants' God. Question 6. What two descendants of Abraham were later included by his name in his covenant? Genesis chapter 6 verse 3 and 4, and Leviticus chapter 26 verse 42 is Isaac and Jacob. Question 7. What new name did God give to Jacob? Genesis chapter 35 verse 10 says Israel. Question 8. What two pictures did God use to show Abraham how numerous his descendants would be? Genesis chapter 22 verse 17 is stars of heaven, or the stars of the universe, and the sand on the seashore. Question 9. How many people did God promise Abraham would be blessed in his seed? Genesis chapter 22 verse 18 says all nations. Question 10. Why did God promise this to Abraham? Genesis chapter 22 verse 18 says, because he obeyed his voice. So Abraham obeyed God's voice of what he told him. Question 11. What did God require Abraham to do for his children and his household in order to receive what God had promised him? Genesis chapter 18 verse 19 says, to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. So live in the right way as God would, and being justy. So I live in a just life. Question B. God's purpose revealed to Moses. Question 12. What were the first two demands that God made on Israel when they came to Mount Sinai? Exodus chapter 19 verse 5 says, obey my voice and keep my covenant. So it's the exact same things that he told Abraham to do. Question 13. Provided Israel fulfilled these demands, what three things did God promise they would be? Exodus chapter 19 verse 5 and 6 says, 1. He'd be my treasured people out of all peoples. There'd be a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. So when it means a priestly kingdom, because Jesus would come and take the sacrifices of all our sins, because he'd come out the tribe of Judah. He's now a high priest, so he takes his the prayers that you do, and says them to his Father, which is God. So he puts it on this like golden altar. You can find it in Exodus, the golden altar. It's an exact copy of the one in heaven, and he puts all the prayers on that thing, and that all goes up to God. And there'd be a holy nation, so they'd be sanctified, like they wouldn't be like any other nations, because Jesus would be coming out of them. Question 14. What else did God promise Israel on the same conditions? Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 1 says, high above all nations of the earth. So because they were God's chosen people, they were high above all other nations on earth, because they were specifically chosen. They were a specific nation chosen by God. It was an authorized nation to be made by God's authority, and so they were sanctified. So they're not like any other nation. They were very unique. Question 15. State 2 ways this would affect the attitude of other people towards Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 10 says, they will see you, and you are called by the name of the Lord, and they will also be afraid of you, because they'll be afraid of Israel, because if they attack them or try and destroy them, they'd be attacked by God. Question 16. What would be the result of Israel keeping God's covenant? Deuteronomy chapter 29 verse 9 says, succeed in everything you do. So if Israel kept God's commands, they succeed in everything that they've done. Well, I'm going to split the videos here, and I'll see you in the next segment. Bye.